Hi everyone, today we are going to talk about persuasion as we begin our third OGT essay, which is kind of a unit in itself, which is our persuasive writing unit. So before we get started, make sure that you know that there are notes that go along with this PowerPoint. They look a little bit lengthy, but they are pretty easy, just fill in the blank. So make sure that you complete those and then turn those into Schoology before our next class. So let's go ahead and get started. What is persuasive writing? Well, persuasive writing takes many different forms. If we look at commercials, billboards, cartoons, particular newspaper stories, those can all be forms of persuasive writing. Basically, any type of writing that attempts to persuade us to adopt a particular point of view, agree with an opinion, take some sort of action, or form a belief are all persuasive writing. And any type of writing that involves an argument. So when we think of point of view, it's important that we know that every piece of writing, including persuasive writing, comes from a specific point of view or a specific perspective. So for example, if you have ever known two people who were once a couple and then broke up, you know that if you talk to both of them individually, you are likely to get two completely different accounts of how and why they broke up, and this is because they each have a different perspective or a different point of view. So all persuasive writing has a point of view. If it's your paper, then obviously it's going to be your point of view. If it's someone else's writing, it's important to look at what their point of view is. Now you really want to make sure that you look at point of view, especially when we're reading about something important like political candidates. So, for example, if you are reading about a particular political candidate and you're reading about how brilliant she is, what a talented leader she is, it might be important to know that the person who wrote that piece was the campaign manager. However, if you're reading about the same political candidate and you're reading about how incompetent she is, then it might be important to know that it was written from the point of view of her opponent's campaign manager. So point of view or perspective is very important. Another example would be looking at the point of view of Cinderella or her wicked stepmother. Cinderella's point of view might be something like, my dad used to have good taste in women. He married my beautiful, kind mother, didn't he? After she died, though, he settled for my stepmom, who was nothing but a mean, hateful old hag. But if you look at the wicked stepmother's point of view, she might say something like, when I first met my husband, I should have known he was too good to be true. If I had known then that I'd be saddled with his lazy, worthless stepdaughter, I would never have agreed to marry him. So again, two completely different points of view. When we talk about persuasive writing, it's important that we talk a little bit about the dead Greeks. And when I mean the dead Greeks, I'm talking about Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. They really were the people that defined the art of persuasion. They believed that argument or debate were the highest form of discussion and that it could eventually reveal the highest ideals or truths. Many of the people in ancient Greece at the time would gather or walk around and literally just argue for hours for the sake of arguing about a given subject. Those who could argue both sides of an issue regardless of their own belief were highly admired. And that's an important thing to remember. A lot of times when we're talking about the art of debate, we need to remember that the best debaters are able to argue both sides of the topic. So Socrates, he invented the art of philosophical discussion. After inheriting money upon the death of his father, he devoted his life to engaging in discussions with young people from wealthy families in Athens. He questioned their confidence in the truth of popular opinion. Because he was questioning popular opinion, he became very popular himself with young people. But of course, parents were very leery of his influence on their young children. So he was eventually charged with corrupting the young and meddling with religion, and he was convicted and sentenced to death. He decided that he was going to take matters into his own hands, and he killed himself by drinking hemlock while surrounded by his friends and family. Most of what we know about Socrates comes from the writings of Plato, who we're going to talk about next. So Plato was actually a student of Socrates, and he also studied under Pythagoras. You know Pythagoras from the Pythagorean theorem. Plato established his own academy in Athens, and he liked to ask really difficult questions like, is it ever justified to defy the rule of the state? His most famous written work is called The Republic. Next, we're going to talk about Aristotle. He was the student of Plato, so he spent 20 years studying at Plato's academy in Athens. He became a teacher himself and created his own school as well. He spent his life examining topics like logic, philosophy, ethics, physics, biology, psychology, politics, and rhetoric. When we look at the First Amendment, we are looking at the fact that just like the ancient Greeks, the founders of the United States believed in the importance of freedom of speech. They believed such freedom would allow a marketplace of ideas where any idea could be thrown out for discussion. I'm sure this is something that you've talked about a lot in social studies. The First Amendment to the Constitution, as you should know, protects our rights to freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition. When we're talking about universities and the art of persuasion, higher education began in 387 BC when Plato created his ancient Greek academy. Students were taught to discuss and debate difficult questions, such as, what is the meaning of life? Eventually, this discipline of debate and discussion became the center of a liberal arts education, which is the foundation of many of today's universities. And even today, on university and college campuses across the country, you can find groups of students engaging in lively debates with their teachers. Even I had to take a debate class in college and debate whether or not, at the time, I thought that casinos should be established in Ohio. When we're talking about Congress and persuasion, before a bill can become a law, it is debated and discussed in committee meetings or on the floor of the House of Representatives or the Senate. The result is that the legislators can change their minds or create compromises that ultimately ensure a bill's passage into law. So debate, argument, and persuasion really grease the wheels of the government. They're very important. Now, the next thing we need to talk about, and we will continue our discussion of this during our next class, is fact versus opinion. To write a persuasive paper, you have to present an opinion. You've got to make a point and try to convince others that your opinion is the correct one. So, for example, you can't write a persuasive paper about penguins. You might write a report on penguins or an informative expository essay on penguins. However, you should not be you can't be persuading your readers when it comes to penguins. You would just be telling them about penguins. Papers that persuade have to be filled with facts and opinions. So, as you know, a fact is a piece of information that can be confirmed or verified. For example, you can confirm that seawater tastes salty. All you have to do is take a nice little sip of salt water. You can confirm that Johnny Depp was in Pirates of the Caribbean. All you have to do is go and check out that video, Netflix or on cable, and you can see that Johnny Depp is in that movie. An opinion, on the other hand, is simply a point of view that someone holds. So, for example, it is a fact that some tomatoes are red. It is an opinion that tomatoes taste disgusting. It is a fact that The Simpsons is a TV show. It is an opinion that it is the funniest cartoon on TV. All right, so that is our little video lecture on persuasion. Again, make sure that you complete the persuasion notes and turn those into Schoology prior to our next class. And that's all for today. Have a great day.